Maj is on the phone with us now, and it's good to talk to you, my friend. I was so glad to see you up on that stage.
I mean, first, thanks for having me, Dana. And second, I looked very, very handsome on the stage. I have to be honest about that.
You dress up nice in a. That's the first time I've ever seen you in a suit.
I trick everybody. I just wear BGM hoodies all the time and just trick everybody.
That was you, and you did a great job, and you were really well received. Which I was. I mean, I'm glad that you brought such a really energetic message about this. I got to ask your opinion on now that. Well, it's not decided yet, but for all intents and purposes, it might be. But Joe Biden got the endorsement of Beto O'Rourke, that to whom we affectionately refer to as the El Paso Furry. But Beto O'Rourke, as you remember, he was the guy out there saying, "Hell yes, we're going to take your AR-15. Yes, we're gonna do a quote unquote buyback of all of this stuff. Yes, we're gonna and maybe we'll come and force you to hand your firearms over." How do you feel now that looks like Beto O'Rourke looks like he's going to be for the lack of a better way to put it, Joe Biden's gun control czar? If Joe Biden's the nominee and he's going to have him as part of his, I guess, as part of his team, how does it make you feel?
It makes me feel like the reality that we've been saying at Black Guns Matter for a few years, which is urban America has to get involved in this fight, and we need conservative and liberty-minded folks to galvanize and support that fight. Because just because, Beto gets out or Mini Mike or anybody gets out, that doesn't change the fact that their money, their fundraising capabilities, they're all going into whoever's going to get that nomination. And more than likely, if it's looking like Joe at this given moment, and at any given moment, he can, pull out President Obama. I think that they're going to pull on emotional heartstrings, and more so than now, we need to merge the conservative message, especially in urban America, because that's exactly where they're going to take that message. Yeah. That's exactly where they're going to go target. That's exactly who they're going to lock up first for owning firearms is urban America. It's all hoods across America. So I think it's funny. We do the memes and everything. Beto drops out, all this other stuff. But listen, these guys have already fundraised. They can get that money to whoever they want to give it to. They can get behind whoever they want to give it to. And one thing that the left has that we haven't been focusing on as much is they have unity. Even if they do, they look completely insane. However, when it's time to galvanize to take a freedom, they execute very, very well. So I think everybody should be very, aware of that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good point. I mean, it's one thing to, people can joke about it and laugh about it, but really, the elections are not all certain. I mean, you can be doing great in the polls one day, but then, we're still pretty far ways out from November. A lot of stuff can take place. And just as, I never thought that Mike Bloomberg was going to get into the race the way that he did. Do you think that his involvement in the primary, even though he's out now, but there was a lot of discussion on stop and frisk. And I know that, in some instances on the right, there are people who are divided on it. And I always rejected the idea that you can't somehow criticize the policy and still support good law enforcement. But does it make sense to you that, because I feel like it's the same formula with red flag law when you look at stop and frisk, because you're reducing the evidentiary standard to just reasonable suspicion from probable cause. Isn't that one of the things that we are criticizing where it concerns red flag laws, Maj?
Absolutely. It's like people can't, you got to be very, very intellectually, honest as well as consistent. The reality is how that plays out. What someone says, I did a panel with one of Bloomberg's guys from Everytown, the CEO over there. And basically he was saying, well, it's stop, question, and frisk. The reality is, okay, that's cute on a piece of paper. That's how it sounds like. But the reality is how it's executed, especially in urban America. If you say to a law enforcement officer, sometimes, I'm talking about the corrupt portions of law enforcement. Bad guys exist, good guys exist, whatever. But those small amounts of guys. If you say, hey, man, I'm cool. Yeah, no, I don't fit the description or, I really kind of just don't want to talk right now. Then even that gets, presented as, well, why aren't you letting me do my job? And how it's executed, like it's been shown to, it's affected negatively. And we had this thing called the Fourth Amendment, like it's there. Like it's there, and it's kind of high up on the list too. And I think that what happens when you can get that off in an area where people have, like a Bloomberg, will justify, 90% of the criminals look like this. When you can convince people of that falsehood, right, wrong, or indifferent, when you can convince people of that falsehood and you make an entire community look or feel like, oh, well, this Fourth Amendment thing isn't actually a human right for you because you actually are like denizens to a certain extent, that is going to it resembles the red flag law in that same way. It's, well, if this guy didn't, open the door up at 3 o'clock in the morning, what does he have to hide? The reality is there's a reason why we have a Constitution and a Bill of Rights. There's a reason. Again, to the earlier statement, we have to, like the work we're doing at Black Guns Matter, not just with firearm safety and conflict resolution, but also, you got to get people in these urban areas, millions, tens of millions of people in, maybe 4 or 5 cities. You might be talking about 20 million people. This is a voting bloc that has to understand this reality, because the people that we're up against on the left they already entrenched. The PR that they've been able to spend for decades is already there. We have to step this up most effectively, very quickly. And like you said, November's it's a far way out, but it'll be here way before you know it.
Yeah, I was happy to see that people were finally realizing, at least when discussing it in the commentary surrounding the debates, that people actually finally woke up to the fact that this is a gun control tactic. So people, and I know that when they were debating on CNN or MSNBC, that was kind of glossed over, but thankfully elsewhere people were calling it out for what it was. It was a gun control tactic. Do you think that
Right.
that maybe the times have shifted? I just thought that when I looked at how much Michael Bloomberg spent in Virginia, and this is the guy who, he funds the criticism against you, Maj. He funds all this stuff.
Right.
Does it feel like
Right.
the tides are changing a little bit? Where do you feel in that big fight? Obviously we're always going to have to push back against that, but in this latest endeavor, how secure do you feel in this fight and the pushback in Virginia and elsewhere that you've seen? Are we around a corner? Are we at that point yet?
No, we're not at the. I do feel much more pushback from our side to the other side. I don't think we're around that corner yet. I think that they got so cocky with and arrogant that they just went for Northam is just like, yeah, throw the Hail Mary. He's throwing a Hail Mary in the third quarter, like it doesn't even matter. They played themselves on that way because, fortunately, for how many years people were running around going, I think they're trying to, take guns. And, in the beginning, everybody's like, come on, bro, that's not what it is. Nobody's thinking about taking your guns. Then they come outright and say it. So they're actually helping us by being so arrogant. And so when people are around, especially in these urban areas, going like, nah, this is not okay. Then you see in Richmond on Lobby Day, you see 20, 30,000 people descend on the city. You see people going, dude, you're the dude pushing for SB 64. Aren't you the dude in blackface next to the guy in the Klan robe? Yeah. The advent of social media, as well as the advent of years and years, people so far along, like guys like Ken Blanchard, who were black dudes saying these things 15, 20 years ago, and it's like, oh, they actually were. So I don't think that we've turned that corner because we can't get cocky. However, I do think that the tactics that they're using, they're not as clandestine, and it's a lot easier to point it out. Again, Beto, hell yeah, we're going to take your guns. That's an arrogant statement. You know what I'm saying? And so even down to Bloomberg. Oh, you're just going to skip 4 primaries. You're just going to buy your way in. People on the left, y'all are just forget Bernie twice in a row. We're just going to cut him right off twice. The contradiction is being exposed, and people all over the country, maybe even the world. I was talking to the son of the president of Brazil at CPAC, and I'm discussing things with him, and it's like the entire world is watching Virginia right now, and our response to it. The fear that I have is they won't know how to fall back, take the loss quietly for a second, right, and regroup. The fear that I have is they'll double down and they're going to push for more red flag laws, which will get law enforcement officers harmed, which will get American citizens harmed of any ethnic background. It does not matter. I have a fear that their level of arrogance will continue as it has been, but I think the more that they expose the true nature of what they actually are, the nature of the threat gets more exposed, more and more people go, oh, wait, even people on the left. I mean, you got things like, President Trump was saying to CPAC, we even had a guy leave the Democratic Party and come over to the Republican side behind all of this arrogant, impeachment foolishness. It is so blatant that even not even politicians, people that live in these communities that are historically left are like, wait a minute, wait, 52% tax? What if I want to make $10 million in 5 or 10 years? So I'm supposed to give it to Bernie and his crew?
Right.
For what?
Right.
So these are the things that the arrogance on all levels, the arrogance of the blatant statements, some people did something. It's so blatant that even the rank and file that generally would vote in that direction are like, nah, and they're much more receptive to our message of liberty.
Exactly. Liberty sells. And when you can message that, which you do well,
Yeah.
it sells. Maj Toure, Black Guns Matter. It's blackgunsmatter.com, correct? Is that where I can send people?
Well, it's where you can send people. Shameless plug. We had a march to $1 million. We've raised at this point about $280,000 to do these classes all around the country for free. Everyone that's listening, man, we are on a march to $1 million so we can get a building, so we can franchise. These need to pop up like Dunkin' Donuts everywhere.
I love
With
that.
this being
Oh
the
my
case,
gosh. I love
yeah,
that.
Yeah. GoFundMe.com/Black Guns Matter. If you're rich, if you happen to have $700,000 laying around, we could use it. If you got $7 that we could use, we'll take it and appreciate it, and make sure that we're strengthening that message of liberty in these urban centers. That is the key.
Amen.
That is the key. For decades, the left has had a stranglehold in these areas. We have to break that with firearm safety, conflict resolution, and political education. So that, everybody can go to GoFundMe.com/Black Guns Matter.
I see pictures of you around the country, and I know it's working because there are a lot of people speaking out about it, and I love seeing that 2A movement grow. Maj Toure, always a pleasure. We'll talk with you again because we got a lot of election days ahead of us, Maj. God bless you. So glad that your voice was out there, and keep up the fight.